Hey everybody! Welcome to Friday the 13th, the series. I'm your producer, Robert.
And I'm your guest, Jeremiah.
And after a complete, spoiler-filled recap of the episode, we are going to discuss the show you either just learned existed or always wondered how it existed. We promise the answers will be few and far between because we're just here to have some goofity fun exploring a show that, despite or possibly even because of its faults, isn't good and isn't so bad it's good, but is still somehow oddly charming. Let's dive in, shall we? Dearest Martha, we've been recording this episode for so very long. Our stores are nearly depleted of hardtack and sweet potato coffee. Yes, that was a thing. Each session, we grow more weary. I pray that Providence brings this foolhardy venture to its natural conclusion forthwith, so that I may once again know your warm embrace as we finally watch episode 14. Well, I think I'll borrow from Star Trek The Next Generation and title this episode All Good Things, because Jeremiah and I finally finished discussing this episode. Of course, first we'll finally lay to rest our optional side quest of determining what exactly constitutes a cursed object. I'll finish recapping the episode, he and I will discuss it, and finally, inevitably, we'll veer off into tangential topics including the famous Nosferatu lawsuit and the 1986 Ken Russell film Gothic. If this is your first time listening, boy, you screwed up. I strongly suggest you go find part 1 of the episode 13 review. Contrary-wise, there's really no reason to watch along for this final part, but if you'd like to enjoy any other episode, they're all currently available to stream for free on YouTube. Although I would be negligent in my duties if I failed to point out the channel hosting them has changed a few times. So tarry not. A link to a current host can be found on the Inner Demon Entertainment website. In episode 5, technically, Mickey uses the amulet that ends up bringing Uncle Lewis back to corporeal form.
Oh, true. Was there any implication, though, in the episode of there being a price?
No, she got tricked. She's trying to help Uncle Lewis.
Yeah.
Again, they talk about being an innocent. She thought she was doing a good thing to help someone.
Right. No implication that by using the object that this in any way even changes Mickey. There's no sense of it having a power over her or like something that she even has to be aware of going forward. Or
just let me free, Grace, and I'll end the curse.
It's kind of a weird case where someone's soul is involved, but I mean, we don't even know if the amulet. Did she use the amulet? Like what? I mean, it's all so ambiguous and off screen, Jeremiah. I mean, he literally said, "I killed my wife with my ambition," and they're like, "Oh yeah, that checks out."
Well, Caitlin died from stories. His wife could died from ambition. We don't know.
I mean, that's it, man. They have no idea what they're doing.
Okay. So, I mean, you don't recall there being any sense of this slippery slope implication, or
no.
You used this thing for good that time, but like,
no,
almost like Superman snapping someone's neck. Okay, you did it
for greater good,
quote unquote, for good.
No,
but like,
no,
we can't do this because it was just like it happened and there's no mention or implication at all.
No, zero. Absolutely not. Absolutely zero.
Interesting.
This 5th episode already broke whatever pattern I saw with this show, specifically in the way it handled the object and in some other ways too. But by episode 5, I'm like, oh, the show already breaks patterns. So really, I mean, can you call it a pattern if you're breaking it by 5? And now 13 kind of seems to do that too. And I mean, even the Scarecrow one, 2 episodes previous, where this really feels like Supernatural, where this is an away game. No curious goods, no home base, none of the locations we're used to seeing. They're totally on the road. They don't even get back to the shop by the end or start there. The whole thing's a field trip. If anything, I'm like, yeah, this is the show without patterns. So,
well, I guess not so much pattern as theme, though. I don't know. I do feel, I feel like, and this isn't the only time that it breaks it. So that's, obviously, how many times does it have to break it before you say, well, maybe that's just a misinterpretation of the show itself.
Yeah.
But I felt like a intention of the show was you do sort of become a lost soul by falling for them.
Believe it or not, I don't enjoy criticizing the show unnecessarily, but I think I'm kind of in a box here. And I don't see, I guess I'm agnostic in terms of a greater vision for the show. To tell a certain kind of story in a certain way, speaks to a certain culture and the way they expect stories to be told, you're going to fall into certain tropes, certain patterns are going to emerge.
Sure.
And I feel like that's what we're seeing.
And you feel like that's more the driver than conscious considerations.
Yeah, I mean, to go back to Watchmen, I feel like these episodes are cogs in a makerless mechanism. Yeah, of course, the episode about the lonely guy is the one where he gets a statue that lets him score with the ladies.
Right.
It would be weird if the lonely guy was the one that discovered the thing that makes a heavy person thin, the way they always dreamed about. For that to work thematically, yeah, the lonely guy gets the thing, and now he can abuse that power, and we all learn a little lesson. But in terms of some kind of master plan, this perfectly woven Middle Eastern tapestry with elaborate themes throughout all of it, I don't see it.
Even though going with what we're familiar with, I would say part of what we're familiar with is that objects that have evil-based supernatural power, to use them usually comes at a price, even if you're well-intentioned.
Yeah, that's at least a trope of all Western storytelling, maybe Eastern storytelling too.
Right.
Sure, you get a bunch of power and you abuse it and it costs you. Lesson learned.
Well, it's not even abuse it. Not every monkey's paw story is about them abusing it. It's just about them using this thing that's forbidden. Loving spouse, loving father, whatever, there's going to be a price to pay.
Yeah, you're getting into Hellraiser territory here. And the thing that always kind of rubbed me the wrong way, where it's like, I don't know, I just came across this box and I picked it up. And like everyone else, I somehow accidentally solved it. And now like I'm damned for all eternity.
Right, right.
And in that remake on Hulu, it's like, oh, a blade pops out and pricks you. And now I'm going to use that fact to just stab someone with it. And now they're doomed. It's not fair.
I haven't seen that one yet, but yeah, that's true. But I mean, I guess that even goes into more like it's so ingrained to where sometimes we don't even question how in that example it is incidental. The person is just a victim. Kind of like in this one, Jagger is a victim in all this. He's not really the scoundrel. He's just a guy trying to run a room, you know?
It's the grindhouse horror films or just the grindhouse films of the 70s.
Yeah.
It's not the horror film where they go looking for the dark knowledge and that ends up consuming them. It's just, hey, my wife and I went out for a fun weekend by a lake and then some hillbillies had their way with us.
Right.
We didn't do anything to deserve that. That's just life, baby.
Of course, a lot of times in those grindhouse movies, the protagonists are kind of awful too, sometimes.
I guess what I'm saying is there's all types, and that seems to be Friday the 13th, the series, in a nutshell.
Right. I am curious, how many other examples are there of does anyone use a cursed object and they don't pay a price and everything's okay as a result?
No comeuppance.
Could these cursed objects be used to solve the world's problems? Could they just use it for good to actually fight the devil? Is that a different show that they could make?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I mentioned that very idea in a previous episode.
Yeah.
I've never been operating on the assumption that they damn you to hell, so I've often speculated what these objects might be used for. The pen that grants wishes, definitely. And in that one, I mean, he's joking, but Ryan mentions maybe they could use the pen a little bit, and Jack doesn't even bring up the idea that, well, no, you can't, because it would doom your soul for all eternity. They're just like, oh, Ryan.
But I'm assuming Jack's like, now, Ryan, like, you know.
Yeah, well, like I said,
like Jack
joking.
doesn't go,
Yes, I just said
yeah, we
that
actually should do that. Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, it came up in the context of a joke, but he's playing it up like it's an option.
If you did use it for good and there was no price, no consequence, why would that be a joke?
Again, I don't know what's going to happen with these objects. I don't know if this is a Ghostbuster situation where they collect them back in the vault and then they're all going to get sprung back out. Someone's going to break in. And I am working with very little information here.
Yeah.
I don't know. And I won't until I see every episode.
Right.
And even that might not answer it, because to give them credit, maybe they had intentions beyond the scope of 3 seasons.
Right.
I don't know. But in terms of what we've been given, those questions go unanswered. So I'm going to chalk it up to 80s network writing,
Okay.
which is
Fair
always my answer for 99% of your questions.
Right.
I don't mean to be cruel, Friday the 13th, the series, but my hands are kind of tied here. Thank Jeremiah. And I need to make the anti-pulling taffy gesture here. We've gone 48 minutes longer than I expected for material that's almost entirely going to be cut.
Going to be cut out. Yep. 100%.
It's going to be a nightmare to edit this. We go on to color. Can we just wrap this up? We've got 3 minutes left if we can get to where they're back in color.
But that might lead to the Nosferatu conversation if you want to have that. about Florence and Caitlin.
Oh, that's right. You've got more themes. I forgot. I thought we tackled all your themes in the first record.
And then the air question is if you want it, we could still discuss syndication.
That answers that. I'm calling it. Stop recording. Back in Curious Goods, Mickey must have gotten a real taste for the past because she's donned the evening gown of a 1920s flapper hosting a jazz-fueled speakeasy soiree. Honestly, she looks naked without a cigarette at the end of a foot-long brass holder. Conversely, Ryan is wearing, for the first time, something that doesn't smack of the 80s in the form of a shirt that actually looks like it might have traveled back in time from the late 90s. When pressed about the past by Jack, Ryan describes Brom and Caitlin's apartment, with some agitation, as nice and quaint, when the correct answer was something out of a German expressionism film. And as always, Ryan stands uncomfortably close to Mickey as Jack tells them that their friend Brom was most likely Bram Stoker, author of Dracula. Mickey and Ryan share a glance, and unfortunately, we freeze frame on this moment, making it look like Ryan is about to go in for a kiss. Let's get this Sisyphean nightmare on the road. You have a question for me. I have some surprises for you. Why don't you begin, sir?
So in this whole cursed object, does it cost you your soul discussion?
45-minute tangent?
Did the point get discussed? If it doesn't cost you your soul, then what makes it a cursed object and not just a superpowered object, not just a magic object?
I see that your opening move is a question that's going to open a Pandora's box that could easily lead to another 2-hour-long philosophical debate. I would submit that many of the people who use the objects end up dead. So wouldn't that still be part of the curse?
But Mickey and Ryan do not. We would assume you can't use a cursed object without it having to inflict something on someone. That's what makes it a cursed object and not just a powered object, not just a magic object. Because otherwise they could just become the Avengers of cursed object hunters and just take all these objects and use the powers to go and gather up all the other objects.
You've got a recursive object theory.
Right.
I love it. From what I've seen, I don't think the show operates that way. I think you can use the objects for good, and then you're in the clear.
If this was a story about any ever magic Tolkien, He-Man's power sword could be used for good or could be used for evil.
Right, it's magic. It's not cursed.
If we called it a cursed sword, then we would assume, well, no matter who picks it up, it's going to come with a price.
Right, you're saying technically Mickey and Ryan should always be wearing a lead apron and picking these objects up with tongs and looking at them through a welder's mask.
When they choose to use its power, it's not picking it up. I mean, people handle the cursed objects, but when you...
I should probably stop you there, Jerry. I was being flippant.
Yeah.
Maybe this is where your quantum leap theory comes into play, and they're God's chosen soldiers.
Perhaps, yeah. I would just assume by the nature of it being cursed objects that there is going to be a price for using it.
Let's keep that in mind as we jump back to episodes 2 and 3. Last time we spoke, we did talk about Ryan joking about using the objects. Specifically, I brought it up with reference to him wanting to use the pen. I said that it's kind of an odd thing to joke about if really your soul's going to be on the line. I wasn't arguing that as a point because it was all a joke anyway. I wouldn't seriously use that as evidence. You pointed out that they joke about using the object, but don't actually proceed with using the object. And doesn't that in and of itself suggest that maybe they can't? What I failed to mention was Ryan was joking about using it to score with a girl. So there's a moral angle already that just, no, that would not be kosher.
Right.
And in keeping with that, I also want to clarify that I got mixed up, but I bring this up not only to clarify the point, but because it kind of brings up a separate point. It turns out in 2 episodes in a row, Ryan jokes about using the cursed object, both in the close of the episode. I was referencing episode 3, Cupid's Quiver, when Ryan jokes about using the statue to score with a girl. At the time, I mentioned the pen. I got confused with episode 2, The Poison Pen, because in episode 2, Ryan also jokes about using the object, but in this case, Jack answers some of your question by specifically saying that the pen can only be used to grant evil wishes. Therefore, they can't just use it to solve world hunger, for example.
Sure.
And then Ryan jokes that they use it to write out a particularly sinful lunch order, and Mickey and Jack lunge for him, freeze frame, and we're out.
Right.
But that example from episode 2 is maybe more illustrative of someone giving a reason why they can't use the object. But it's not about their souls being damned. It's simply that, well, we could only use it for evil, and we're not evil. Before we move on, do you have a rebuttal?
No, my impression has always been that the objects are not meant to be used, even by a good person with good intentions. The script has left them the only way to get out of it. The script hoping that you don't think about it.
Mm-hmm.
But I did think about it, and I'm like, yeah, that actually shouldn't be happening. Like, you should.
Jeremiah, if I'm sure of one thing in this life, it's that you think about it.
Touche.
Now, with that thought in mind, strap in. Because this podcast is pivoting hard into gotcha journalism. You, sir, are about to get Friday'd. Episode 8, Shadow Boxer. That episode ends with Ryan putting on one of the haunted boxing gloves and then slugging Jack hard in the stomach so that the shadow familiar that gets summoned whenever someone puts on the gloves hits the antagonist of the episode. And then Ryan proceeds to uppercut a kneeling Jack in the face, nearly knocking him out. Ryan is still raging. Mickey is able to calm him down and take the glove off of him. Jack, as he regains consciousness, says the words, "Those things were cursed. Do you know what that means?" Which could lead to speculation about Ryan's soul, but in the context of the episode, I think it is referring to the fact that for God knows what reason, they introduce essentially a new plot point in the absolute close of the episode, in which they're suddenly incredibly worried that Ryan killed the antagonist.
Mm-hmm.
Like so much in this show, they paint themselves into a corner for no reason. And the way they deal with this is they solve it off screen over a commercial break. If this wasn't strange enough already, the protagonist boxer of the story gets roped into this weird off-screen event. We fade back in Curious Goods, and the protagonist boxer comes in and says the other guy's alive at least. And that's a huge sigh of relief for the protagonist boxer, because I guess he thinks maybe he's the reason why an ambulance had to come for the antagonist, that he hit him so hard in the ring that I guess later that night he almost died. Doesn't answer the question of who would have called the ambulance. He's breathing a sigh of relief. At the same time, Mickey and Ryan and Jack are all breathing a sigh of relief. That's how they resolve that, and it's never mentioned again.
I would have thought, based on the general lore of the show, if it doesn't kill your target, then it's going to probably come and kill you.
If the homing missile doesn't find a target, it's going to circle around and set its sights on you.
Right. That seems like it's breaking formula a little bit to me.
Although, to be fair, the creature really is a shadow to a degree, in that it only swings when you swing.
But while that's happening, the person wearing the gloves has 10 times the strength they would normally have. What was the benefit of the power?
The gloves. Yeah, I do think the gloves also make you undefeatable. All I know is it's a bit of a two-way street, where what happened was the antagonist boxer was winning in the ring, but then when Mickey and Ryan just, when they essentially killed, or at least I guess fought to a draw, the shadow creature by essentially shining a flashlight on it, that caused... It's just Looney Tunes, man. I spent an hour talking about the greater philosophy of this show, and it's just Looney Tunes, dude. Like,
basically, the shadow creature, when you're wearing the gloves and you release the shadow creature,
yes,
you become 10 times stronger than what you would normally be. But in the case of Ryan the Lion, that really makes you about the average strength of an 8-year-old. So
I'm an 8-year-old, yes.
So he's able to bat around an old man a little bit.
Pretty much, man. Pretty much. This show absolutely operates though on Wile E. Coyote rules, man. I think I told you this once, but in physics in high school, we once watched some Roadrunner cartoons, and the whole point was, now discuss why we're violating certain rules of physics here.
Okay.
It wasn't the attention of the teacher, but it kind of ended up being comedy gold, because we got the one where it's like, oh, the boulder falls and it falls into a U-shaped canyon, and then it ends up going higher than the height it was dropped from initially.
Right.
oh, that's obviously conservation of momentum being violated there. There would be another one where, oh, obviously that's an inelastic collision acting like an elastic collision, so, obvious violation there. And then there's one where Wile E. Coyote puts a boat motor tied to his waist behind him, and then behind that, he's got a bathtub on wheels, and like they're all on roller skates, and he puts the boat motor in the bathtub and takes off down the road. And we're like, oh, well, obviously that's, well, clearly that can't, because, and also, dude, having a wild within city, that ain't legal either.
Right.
To be fair, I don't think that whole class of 30 students ever got closure and came up with a cogent argument for why you can't do that.
It definitely violates some vehicle codes.
That's right. You got to have your plates clearly displayed in front and back. Getting back to your point, that is another case of someone clearly using the gloves. So we have Mickey and Ryan using one together once, and then Mickey once with the amulet in episode 5, Ryan once in episode 8. There's actually a fair amount of cursed object use in those first 13 episodes so far.
What's the consequences for the Mickey one?
Speaking of me getting confused by back-to-back episodes, in episode 7, that's Dr. Jack. That's the one where Jack falls down an elevator shaft and is more or less fine by the end of the episode, and then certainly fine by the beginning of 8. And then he gets a concussion from Ryan.
Oh, man. That's great.
What was your actual question, though? Was it just, were there any repercussions for use of the amulet in episode 5? I'm throwing you the only bone I got, and that is Jack saying in episode 8, Shadow Boxer, those things were cursed. Do you know what that means? But again, honestly, in context, I think he's alluding to the idea that Ryan might have just killed the man, which is bad, but I would point out they killed the doctor in episode 7, and other people die around them almost every episode.
Yeah.
I'm just saying Ryan already has a lot of blood on his hands by this point. I don't know why he freaks out so much.
Using cursed object has no impact on you whatsoever. Is it really a cursed object, or is it just like, oh, cool, I got a superpower?
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, everyone knows, Jeremiah, you got to pay the troll toll if you want to get this boy's soul.
Yep.
Shall we wrap up our actual discussion of the episode, because we are in the home stretch, and in fact, you might not have anything. I don't really, to be honest with you.
I got some for sure.
You got some hot takes for us. Great. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think we're going to start with them returning to the present and things going back to color.
Yes.
I'm tempted to say that this is the Tron moment, although that's not true because Jack is hip to the fact that they disappeared.
Yes. He clearly saw a event happen, although he's not had enough time to pick himself up off the ground.
And Jack wants to know what happens, and Mickey and Ryan tell him they've had a heck of an adventure, and Ryan kind of smiles.
Yes.
Fade to black. And when we come back, we're in Curious Goods.
So
Jack is just pumping Ryan for information.
Pumping for all this information, wanting all this detail about this time period that you went to.
What was the street like? What was the apartment like?
Right, and it fits along with Jack being this scholarly, academic guy.
Absolutely.
But it's not that far back in time that they jumped. The history books are pretty well covered that period. There's not that much mystery about life in those times.
You could piece together what a street was like back then.
Yeah, it's not like they jump back to ancient history.
You could go to the library, pull out the microfiche, and find newspaper illustrations of what the streets look like.
Well, it's Europe. Yes, London is a bustling city that does develop, but compared to the United States, Europe's streets don't change that much. They preserve a lot of elements, is what I'm saying.
Doesn't take that much set dressing to make Europe look like it did 100 years ago in certain places.
Exactly. And he's traveled the world, so he's been to London. He's read plenty of history books on what London was like 100 years ago.
They weren't hanging out with druids at Stonehenge. They weren't in ancient Egypt.
Right. Yeah. He's asking questions that a guy like Jack should probably already frankly know the answers to. It matches his intellectual curiosity, but it doesn't match the fact that he's...
Oh, Jack has definitely been on a Jack the Ripper walking tour in Whitechapel, which incidentally is specifically where they say that they were.
Right. He's probably led them at some point. It is...
Touché, sir. Well played. Now, most scholars will tell you, but I have a pet theory that, in fact...
Right. And all this is going on. And then, of course, Mickey is just looking very mopey
As is her wont.
and kind of irritable in this entire epilogue.
And what is with
So-
the house coat she's wearing?
Oh, I didn't even make a note on that. What was going on with the house coat?
You have to see it to believe it. I mean, it looks like Gilda should be wearing it in the movie Gilda.
Okay, yeah.
She's wearing a garment you would wear to a party in a black and white movie in which there would be at least one very portly gentleman wearing a fez. It's weirdly anachronistic in an episode that's so anachronistic.
Do you think it's meant to indicate that she is switching her fashion sense now that she's been...
I don't think she's gone native, if that's what you're asking.
Right, yep. That's where I was going.
No, it's not from that period at all. This would be Edwardian at most.
Okay.
Probably more like 1920s or 30s.
Interesting. Yeah.
Of all this fashion in the show, it's not in keeping with her sense of style at all. But anywho, what was your next point?
The big reveal at the show is obviously coming up here at the very end, which is that Abraham is, in fact, Bram Stoker. The way how we come to this is Jack has come to this conclusion, I guess, based on the information, obviously, that there's a vampire, but then also that he was married to a woman named Caitlin. Well, that could only be one person.
Super weird given the liberties that they're taking with his wife.
Right. So then he opens up the book of Bram Stoker's Dracula, and inside is written the inscription that it's dedicated to Caitlin.
Yes, the only woman he will ever love.
In real life, Bram Stoker was not married to anyone named Caitlin. Bram Stoker's wife was named Florence. The reason why I know that, and the reason why that's relevant to the history books, is because Florence was sort of famous for being involved in a lawsuit around the Nosferatu film, which this might be a good time to actually talk about that.
No time like the present. Let's do it. If you like the horror genre as much as we do, you can preview the horror comic book Requiem for a Psychopath right now for free at the Inner Demon Entertainment website. Imagine a world in which horror film slashers are real. Then imagine a troubled teen bringing one out of retirement to help him take revenge on his bullies. It was written by me and drawn by friend of the show, Stephen Yu. Again, that's Requiem for a Psychopath on the Inner Demon Entertainment website. And if you dig it, please either review and rate it 5 stars on Amazon, or don't rate and review it at all. Ratings of less than 5 stars send the algorithm into murder mode for some reason. Thanks. I hope you enjoy it.
You know much about the thing that happened around the Nosferatu lawsuit?
We're talking about why that movie has a Count Orlok and not a Count Dracula.
That's a big part of it, yeah, for sure. So, Nosferatu, which is obviously a very famous film from 1922, was clearly based on the novel Dracula. And in fact, when they were looking for funding, and I think there was even a point where early on, as they were putting posters and things together to try to pitch people to fund the production of it and things like that, it was said on the posters that this is Dracula. Somewhere in that process, they realized, wait, we don't have the rights to make the movie Dracula because Bram Stoker has those rights, and Bram Stoker had passed away by this point, so those rights would then fall to his family, which is Florence. So they pivoted and said, okay, let's change some things. Let's change the look of this vampire. Let's not call him Dracula.
Let's file the serial numbers off this.
Yeah, so they changed some things, but there was enough published material that showed, beyond just obviously the script being clearly a copy of Dracula in many, many ways, they had this published material that it was intended to be a filmed version of Dracula.
What I would not give to get my hands on an early production poster.
Yeah. And this is a German film. Florence is living in the United Kingdom. And I don't know 100% all the ins and outs about intellectual property law at the time. There were some things where it got tricky, where back then you'd have to submit it to different regions. You'd have to file it separately to protecting the United States versus protecting it in Europe versus protecting it in some other parts of the world. By default, though, even without doing all of that, in Europe, I think it was something like, and you'd have to consult obviously a turn of the century, 2 centuries back, intellectual property lawyer to get it exactly right. But I think it was, 50 years past either the time of death of the author or maybe the time of publication. I'm not sure which.
That's okay. We all know your specialty is maritime law, Jeremiah.
Right. So even without all the proper filings in Europe, you had certain protections as the author, even if you didn't extend it beyond through proper filing. So basically there was some coverage there to say, okay, even if they're making this film in Germany, Dracula is published in, I believe, 1897, Nosferatu is from 1922, this is covered. So Florence caught wind. She hadn't even seen the film, but basically someone on travel, I believe had sent her materials on this film is coming out in Germany. It's getting a lot of buzz. It's kind of a big deal, but it's clearly based on Brahms' work. And they even came across some of the early evidence that was undeniably based on Dracula. At the time, it was a pretty landmark case, which makes Florence pretty historically relevant herself.
I did not know it was landmark.
Yeah, as far as intellectual property law at the time, that was a pretty famous case. And as far as film history is concerned, it's also a pretty impactful case.
Well, that's why I know about it, because of its impact on film history, obviously. But legally speaking, I didn't know it was any big deal.
It was a pretty notable case, for sure. If for nothing else, though, probably because it's a big book taking down a big film and doing it across borders.
Come to think of it, wait a minute. Your statement of across borders just has me thinking about the years this was going on. So the 20s.
1922.
Wow. Also on the precipice of England fighting Germany in World War I?
Yeah, so she won the case, and as part of the winning, she basically said, I want all prints of Nosferatu destroyed, which then they proceeded to do. However, because it was a big hit in Germany, and at this point it spread a little bit around throughout Europe, prints had already made their way to the United States, and intellectual property law was a little bit different in the United States. And I think there was something that would have covered him, but it would have been a whole different lawsuit to be able to order that the prints that were physically located in the United States would also be destroyed. It wasn't that many compared to obviously the many, many prints that were floating around Europe. And the fact that we can see Nosferatu now and sort of say that it's its own brilliant cinematic piece of work is a result of them avoiding the destruction orders because they were able to escape those orders by having prints that made it to U.S. soil.
USA. For once we didn't destroy something. Amazing.
But it's a real interesting case in that sense, too, because without question, these were money men that wanted to make a film based on someone else's creation without paying the creator. But then they created something which has its own artistic merit. And then that thing almost did not exist any longer because justice being served on the original artist, right? It's a really interesting scenario where normally you would take the stance of, or at least I would take the stance, working in the film industry, like protecting your intellectual property is something I've had to do, is something I've been on that side of things in the course of my career where I know what it's like to go through that without going into any details on it.
I was going to say, if you want to delve into it, feel free, but
no,
yeah, I'm not pressing on that one.
No, I don't.
I've told that story too many times.
Yeah, but it's something that we all kind of have to deal with. You're like, yay, the Strokers won, but at nearly the cost of this other piece of art. So it's really an interesting, what is the greater good, what is the greater evil scenario. Obviously, the real answer is, well, hey, just do things the right way and give credit where credit's due and give proper compensation. But when that doesn't happen, what then is the course forward? What would have been the greater shame?
Yeah, this is where the camera pushes in slowly on me, and I turn and say, we won, Jeremiah, but at what cost?
Right.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point, and I brought up the issue that what with the release of Robert Eggers' version of Nosferatu, we have this strange situation where you have the original work that continues to be recreated and reimagined, and then you have the spin-off derivative work that also is now recreated and reimagined. I can't think of many examples of that. Obviously, we have situations like The Thing, but these days it's John Carpenter's remake of The Thing that pretty much spawns sequels and remakes, video games, and the original has been not forgotten, but nobody remakes the original.
Right.
There are examples of that, but I don't think we have many examples where we have two parallel tracks with people opting to reinterpret one or the other, but different people doing it and keeping them both alive at more or less the same time.
And then they actually then also intersect back and forth because there are parts of Count Olaf's lore that were changes that then have circled back in to become part of general vampire lore and Dracula's lore. For instance, I believe Nosferatu is where really the impact in being melted by the sun was introduced.
Really?
Yeah, they would avoid the sunlight.
But they're simply weaker during daylight hours, is that right?
Right,
That's why the characters were able to stake him in the book.
right.
Sorry, spoiler alert.
But that climactic thing of uncovering the windows and being hit by the beam of sunlight
And then bursting into flame?
and bursting into flame, and that being part of how you can take Dracula down.
I'm tempted to push back on that only because I was under the impression from reading books about the supernatural as a kid that one of the old legends about vampires was that one way to defeat them was to put hundreds and thousands of mustard seeds on the roof of your cabin, I guess, cottage house, and vampire for some reason is compelled to try to count them all, and they'll still be doing that come morning and get burnt up by the sun.
Oh,
Although I admit,
yeah.
that is a crazy specific example that I hardly have ever seen since. I actually started to wonder if I dreamt that or something. But I did hear someone bring that up in maybe some podcast or something I was listening to. Although it wasn't mustard seeds, it was, I don't know, hazelnuts or something, but the concept was the same. It's one of those super obscure rules, such as, I think there's something about them not being able to cross moving water.
Sure. There's a lot in the mythology of vampires in general that can change from time to time.
But you're saying that can exist, but it wasn't a part of the literary tradition.
It wasn't part of the Dracula tradition.
Oh, right. I'm the old man not drawing the distinction between vampires and Draculas. I apologize.
Correct, yes. So,
There's a story I think I've told you, but I believe a friend of the show, Matt, also really enjoys it, being such an aficionado of vampires and Dracula. The comedian Artie Lang was telling this story about this old man in his apartment building. The guy told him once that he was watching the show Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and Artie asked him, "Oh yeah, so what's that show all about?" And the response was, "Jew broad kills Draculas."
yeah, I think I've heard that one, yeah.
Delightful. On so many levels. I've really only ever seen the movie, believe it or not.
No, I think that's true. I mean, it took me a long time to even watch the 2 seasons of the show, but I did watch.
Oh, that's right. And then you had issues with the poor production quality of the box set.
Right, yep.
I recall now.
Well, I didn't actually even watch it on box set. I was watching it an unremastered version. And then when I heard, oh, they're going to remaster it, I put it on hold. Because I was like, oh, well, great. I'll just wait, rather than sit and watch 7 or 8 seasons of this thing now and then want to watch the remastered version. I'm like, let me put it on the back burner. And then found out the remastered version was terrible. Just never got back to it.
Did you have any more about the lawsuit?
The good news is later when Universal Pictures decided to make Dracula, they did go through the proper channels and did pay the estate correctly and gave proper credit for using that name and using that creation. So that was done with Florence's permission, unlike Nosferatu.
I'll just mention that I mentioned 20s being the precipice of World War I, and even as I was saying it, I knew that that didn't quite sound right, probably more like when the war was wrapping up, and in fact, it was done by 1918.
Right.
But friend of the show, Matt, was good enough to hip me to the fact that, do you remember a few recording sessions ago, I was surprised that there hadn't been a movie about the night that the Shelleys and Dr. Polidori and Lord Byron all got together and told ghost stories. They eventually gave us Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and of course you pointed out that The Bride of Frankenstein references that night and tells a variation of it. Friend of the show, Matt, I gotta refer to him as TV's Matt, mentioned that there was a film called Gothic by Ken Russell that actually, I will say, tells that story, but in the loosest sense, Jeremiah.
I'm sorry, it tells the story of them telling the ghost stories, or it tells the story of one of the air stories that was told?
Well, theoretically, it would be them telling stories, but they don't really tell stories. They basically just have a laudanum-fueled orgy and all go insane over the course of a night.
Ah, okay.
So I don't know how much you know about that real night. We talked about different figures' sexuality, obviously, but this movie posits that, yes, all that, but also that they were all more or less laudanum addicts. That was the point of the evening, and yes, it inspired Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, but no storytelling was actually done. They simply devolved into madness, and then the horror of that night resulted in her famous work.
Huh.
I'm 100% certain it's taking some grand liberties, but I will ask you a few detailed questions.
Sure.
One aspect that seems like it might actually be based on truth is the idea that even at the time, tourists were basically it was the Geneva Romantic period equivalent of maps to the stars homes, that they were actually tourists in Switzerland trying to get a glimpse through telescopes and such of the Lord Byron compound.
Mm-hmm.
The way the movie spins it, they seem to be most interested in him. And then it just happens that these other people were showing up as guests that particular weekend.
Yeah, I mean, Lord Byron was the name of that group, for sure.
He was the rock star of the age?
Yeah, he was the star at the time. And even like with the vampire, Lord Byron's name was at the time put all over that story, because while there was a little debate on whose story it is, because he sort of told the story, but Paldori wrote it, people would put Byron's name on it because Byron was the one who moved books.
So that part checks out. Do you know if tourists actually flocked to get a glimpse of his compound?
I mean, that part as a societal thing, there'd be that level of people traveling to get a look at someone's compound.
If they were already wealthy, so I don't know how much more starry-eyed they would have been about getting a glimpse of Lord Byron. Or specifically, if they're English tourists, would they debase themselves like that?
Yeah, I mean, that seems more like it's trying to create a equivalency to how celebrity life is now. Would people flock to see Lord Byron in a public setting? Yeah, 100%. Would they travel just to look through a telescope and try to peek through his windows? I don't know about that. That feels far-fetched to me, but I can't say it's not true. That's just hard to imagine.
It might have been the movie just trying to create a bookend with the end of the film, in which we cut to modern times and there's a tourist boat out on the lake saying, if you look off to your left side, you'll see the former compound of Lord Byron, the place where Mary Shelley's Frankenstein was created on that fateful night.
That seems like it's trying to equate it with modern day things where people are taking those celebrity house tours. Back then, you would have had to travel a lot farther, and you're not just spending 30 seconds on a bus to drive by that place and then drive by another place. Yeah, there's a much deeper investment involved in...
A lot more effort, kids.
Yeah. Now, could I see people showing up to Lord Byron's front door saying, I can't wait to meet you, Lord Byron, the way that people have shown up to celebrities' doors in scary, stalkerish type ways? Sure.
Yeah, they treat it a little more as a Beatles situation with some young ladies climbing his wall or something to run across the compound before his servants can shoo them away.
Right. Yeah, that feels a little extreme.
Lord Byron, played by Gabriel Byrne, by the way.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Julian Sands as Percy Shelley. Natasha Richardson as Mary Shelley. Timothy Spall as Dr. Polidori. And then, most interesting to me, Miriam C.Y.R. as Claire Claremont, Mary's stepsister. Was she present at the real event?
That I don't know. Wouldn't surprise me.
My understanding is, in real life, she was an item with Lord Byron at one point, yes?
Yeah, to some degree, I kind of feel like even Mary Shelley herself might have been a bit of a tag-along. She obviously was an aspiring writer and went on to then become a great writer, clearly, but...
Was she not an item with Percy at that point?
Yeah, no. I mean, they were married at that point, yeah. I guess what I'm saying is it wasn't like, hey, let's get our 4 writer friends only together and have this weekend. It's more like, let's get our friends together and, oh, you're going to bring your wife Mary? Sure. She's clever, too. She can also play in our game.
Are you positing this was a Midsummer situation? She's not coming, right? No, she's not coming. Oh, okay. I mean, I invited her. Right, you invited her, but she said no? She said yes, but no, she's definitely not coming. Do you know anything about their laudanum abuse or any other psychedelics or opium maybe?
Yeah, I mean, opioids were very popular for that time period.
Chasing that dragon?
That was certainly a thing that people were doing back then when they were of that class.
Back when people did drugs?
Hey kids, it's hard to believe people used to be addicted to opioids.
Seemed like a real missed opportunity. You had this collection of famous writers getting together in that time period and not a single mention of absinthe.
Right.
That green liquid looks so good on camera.
Now, was it insane levels that would send them into the mouth of madness? I don't know. Probably not.
That is all the movie has, because they don't tell stories. There's no inciting incident. Things just become freakier and freakier as they all essentially have a bad trip, and then it's over.
If you had a bunch of writers drinking martinis, that's probably more like what it would have been like.
Much like this podcast became my excuse to finally watch Dr. Giggles, a movie that was burned into my brain courtesy of its posters in the video stores. The poster and box cover for Gothic is a variation of The Nightmare by Swiss-English artist Henry Fuseli. You might know it. It's the one of when I researched it, they call it an imp or incubus, but it's this weird little demon-y looking thing crouched on a woman's chest. Sometimes it's used in like horror movies where they're talking about night terrors or nightmares. And the version that they use for the poster and box of Gothic is a recreation of that, but with the weirdest choice of imp. It's not well done.
I have no memory of this film, so I don't have any memory of its poster. I obviously know Ken Russell from Altered States and I guess Tommy, the musical. Was this an 80s movie? I'm guessing based on some of the actors.
Yes.
Yeah, I have no knowledge of this movie whatsoever. So there's a Gothic, but I think it was spelled with a K, with Halle Berry, that was like late 90s, early 2000s, that I've not seen.
Yes. This is Gothic from 1986.
So this is Gothic spelled normal with a C.
Normally.
Okay, yeah.
I knew nothing about it despite the fact that poster has essentially been the hitchhiking ghosts from Disney's Haunted Mansion my entire life.
Yeah.
Burned itself into my brain in the 80s. It's been there ever since. I don't even think I knew the name of the movie, despite the fact it's obviously on the poster. But yeah, I finally got closure on that image. So thank you, friend of the show, Matt.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, I'll have to check this out now. How it's to be found these days. I don't know if it's out on Blu-ray or streaming anywhere, but...
Shout Factory or Vinegar Syndrome have definitely put out a Blu-ray, I'm sure.
Yeah. So I might have to track that down maybe this Halloween or something.
Oh, no, you don't. Don't you go blaming me. I'm not recommending this film. I came here to bury this film, Jeremiah, not to praise it. We made it! 6 whole parts and not a moment of fat. Unbelievable. Of course, if you send enough aggressive emails to Apple Podcasts, I promise I'll release the Robert cut with 4 additional parts, a soundtrack with all the bass removed, and who knows, maybe beloved character, friend of the show Matt, will be reinserted. Wink. So get on that before society implodes, and we'll see you at the next one, where Jeremiah will deliver his treatise on network syndication, which, after 6 parts dedicated to this single episode of Friday, will actually feel refreshing. We'll see you there. Thanks for listening, everyone. We know you have a lot of choices when choosing a Friday the 13th the Series podcast, and we sincerely thank you for choosing ours. We could have had time-traveling vampire Jason Voorhees. Man, what a missed opportunity. Special thanks to Joshua Romeo for original music and to Stephen Yu for original art. And be sure to check out the Joe on Joe podcast, the only podcast where Joe Schlepsky discusses G.I. Joe. If you want to support our show, you can leave a review and rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. If you want an occasional update on our projects, you can sign up for our newsletter at the Inner Demon Entertainment website. And if you want to complain about social media with us on social media, you can find links on our website. If you're anything like me, next episode, Jeremiah will prove what little you thought you knew about syndication, you actually had backwards. And always remember what Carl said to Frylock. It don't matter. None of this matters. Good night, everybody.